we're going to be talking with Charles Redner from the Spoken Word Club, and we're going to speak some words and find out what the Spoken Word Club's all about, your history with it, and what we have coming up. Thanks for coming here, Charles.
Well, thank you for having me today. I have a couple of announcements which we'll get to, but
Yeah.
the Spoken Word Club is 15 years now, and it's an offshoot of the Writers Club. Once a month each year, we used to sit at tables. We'd have all the novelists here, the nonfiction here, and the poets table only had 2 people. So we said, let's start our own club. Thea Iberol and I started this club 15 years ago.
Okay. And were you always drawn to poetry? Did you do poetry before you joined the club?
I was brand new to poetry at that time. I went to a writers' conference over in Tucson, and the keynote speaker on the Saturday night, they usually have a keynote speaker, was Taylor Molley. He's a slam poet. Slam poetry is performance poetry.
Right.
He was like 5 times a national champion. And I saw him read, and I said, oh my goodness. So I became a poet that night.
Okay. Well, do you remember your first poem you tried to knock out? Were you happy with it? Is it something that's always evolving?
Well, poetry for me, it's a funny thing. First thing I did, I was writing a novel. I stopped writing the novel. I found an agent for the novel, but I stopped writing that, and I started writing poetry. And poetry just comes to you. I mean, it's really God's lips to your ears sometimes. That's the way poetry, to me it is. Sometimes it just floats out of the air and it comes. Others you have to work at that are pretty hard. But my first book, when I published it, my little chap book called Long and Coming, because it took me a long time to get into poetry. And when I got into it, finally I realized the whole thing was autobiographical. Okay. I didn't realize that while I was putting it together and writing the poetry, but much of
poetry seems very personal, right?
It
seems something that, it's something from the heart, like you said,
Absolutely.
God's lips to your ears kind of a feeling, right? It's something that moves you more than maybe writing a memoir, so to speak.
Exactly, and what usually happens is the first line or a title will come to you, and then everything flows from there. And if it's really hard, it's probably not meant to be.
What was like one of the poems you thought yourself that just, I saw something, as something happened and it just hit me? Can you remember like one of those moments?
Well, there are special moments, obviously, to all of us. When the towers came down on 9/11, I think every poet in America had to write something about it. So that was one that I did.
And what about like maybe on the fun side? Do you have fun with them sometimes? I think we're gonna read some poetry, by the way, here in a minute. But do you have some fun with them?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, my favorite poems are poems about poetry and about poets, and there's a lot of fun stuff you do. One of the first poems I ever wrote is called Infidelity, and it's a take on skipping your duties and reading poetry instead of going home for dinner right away. Instead of going out with the boys and having a drink, I'm sitting in the car writing poetry. So
instead of golf widows or poetry widows out there.
There you go. They're out there. That happens. But what we do at the Spoken Word, we meet once a month, and I say BC, before COVID, we met in the room downstairs, right here in the community center, the Elm Room, and we met once a month, usually the 4th Tuesday of the month, and we read poetry we've written. We can read from other poets. We can read the masters. You can do anything, and some people just come and listen. But poets like to be together. They like to drink their coffee and talk. I mean, they're a fun group and a loving group.
Do you ever sit in the room, you get inspired, you say, I never thought of doing it that way? Do you kind of feed off each other? We
do, but we don't critique. Everybody comes in, gets 3 minutes to read their poetry, and then you sit down and we talk about it, but we don't critique it per se. But yes, there are a lot of great ideas, and there's super poets. Our poets, we have a feature each meeting, and they come from LA to San Diego and everywhere in between. And they're usually we've had the Poet Laureate of California read. And now we're doing Zoom. We've been doing Zoom since COVID hit. And one of the things I wanted to announce today is that we're coming back September 26th, the last Tuesday of the month, and we're coming back live downstairs in the Elm Room again. Okay. So I'm so looking forward to that.
What would you say is the most important part for people to understand about poetry that maybe they don't understand? Some people find it a little to interpret it. What should they get from poetry?
Well, you get whatever you feel, but the thing is with poetry, as I said, I avoided poetry all through my life, through college. You get introduced to Shakespeare. Maybe that scares a lot of people off. The first time you read poetry, it probably shouldn't be Shakespeare.
Right.
Okay? And so I have a feeling that poetry is just something that people will enjoy, and they'll all get something different out of it. You can write the most serious poem in the world, and people will go away laughing from it. Once you leave your pen, that reader is as important to the interpretation of it as you are as the author.
Right.
So if you laugh at a poem that I thought should be serious, that's your right.
And people can take different meaning. I think that's the important thing, that there's no right or wrong way in some ways to interpret a poem. It just is how it strikes you, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's my impression. And I don't teach poetry, and I just write it, and I read it, and I love it. So,
so you have a poem I want to get to.
Okay.
While we still have some time. It's What Separates Us. I want you folks to be able to hear that from you.
Yeah, that works right into what we're talking about. There's peace poetry. We have a peace day here. It'll be September 21, and it'll be in Clubhouse 7, I think at 4 o'clock. And I'm asking people out there, spoken word people or just people in the village, if you write poetry or have poetry or haven't, I'd like to invite you to send me peace poems. Okay. What separates us? What separates us are oceans and rivers for a start, mountains and fences us part, wavy lines on maps, countries defined, where hidden histories may create past enemies of mind. Politics offers different points of view, which fashions may not agree with you. What separates us? Race, religion, and regulation to bevy, cultural and social mores, weigh heavy. Language generates a huge divide amongst nations, confusing simple wants from hurtful condemnations. Sexual orientation may provide a reference, but may take effort to abide by another's personal preference. Most earthlings we must do upon our diminutive spinning rondure of aqua hue, wandering amid a black void so vast and great that it must be measured by time, not a tape.
Now that's certainly, to me, and I'd imagine that it should be obvious to most, it's really about what shouldn't separate us, right?
Right,
the things
exactly.
that really shouldn't be doing that.
Exactly,
right.
Yes.
And maybe people can take a step back and say, is that something that should separate us? Should we be drawing dividing lines?
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
Yes, that's what poets would say, I think. Poets are like, you ever go to a sushi restaurant and sit at a bar by yourself? They're very friendly people. I mean, if you can't go to a sushi restaurant by yourself because you won't be alone long, because they're like poets. They want to talk, they're friendly, and they're easy to talk to.
That's wonderful. All right, let's try the one. We have one more. I want to make sure we get time for that one. And
Good.
This is World Peace Interrupted.
World
and I have
Peace.
a roll in here somewhere.
So do I.
There we go.
Let me find it here. Okay. This is for Taylor Molly in the land of Gandhi. Taylor Molly is a poet that I first heard. World Peace Interrupted. Imagine a poem that pursues world peace. Thanksgiving dinners sans arguments. A school playground without a scuffle. Civility returns to the U.S. Congress. Imagine a poem that elevates world peace.
Ring, ring.
Rappers remove F-bombs from their lyrics. Folsom Prison skinheads play music on the bars. Mississippi Klansmen burn hand-me-down sheets. Imagine a poem that promotes world peace. Machetes melted for dinner plates in Ethiopia. Fights in Thailand or over Pad Thai or Wonsan. Tanks back up in North Korea. Imagine a poem that advances world peace.
Ring, ring.
Cartel guns in Mexico go silent. Harmony settles over Palestine. War no more in Afghanistan. Imagine a poem that encourages world peace. The spirit of Gandhi spreads throughout Pakistan. Bomb makers in Karachi bake honey cakes instead. Al-Qaeda begs forgiveness before disbanding. I'm writing a poem to foster world peace.
Ring, ring.
Hello?
Lenin would have turned 80 today. Imagine.
I already have.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that is World Peace Interrupted.
Yes.
I have to tell you, I feel like I nailed my part.
Oh, you certainly did. And thank you for participating.
Absolutely.
That was sweet of you.
Charles,
Thank
we
you.
want to make sure we get the first, next time you guys are meeting again, September 26th.
Right.
And you're also inviting folks to send in some poetry
Yes.
for World Poetry Day? World Peace?
World Peace, yes.
Peace poems, yes. Peace poems for Peace Day.
And they can send it to redcharlie@aol.com.
Yep, we got that information and the phone number up on the screen.
Okay.
I want to thank you very much. It was a fun experience this
Oh,
morning.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much
Hope
for
you
coming,
enjoyed it.
Charlie.
Take
Did, I
care.
definitely did. Coming up next, we have Old Pros Presents. Stay with us.
You would.